Okay, welcome back. We're still working with the initial connection in the client session about creating rapport and balancing states and strategies, and we're continuing on with information gathering.
And of course, well-formed outcome is going to come up in information gathering. Remember, the well-formed outcome is designed as an informational gathering tool or information gathering. And it's not designed as an intervention. Oftentimes, change will happen just moving through the questions, but it's designed as a structured way to gather information.
Right. And once you've practiced a well-formed outcome and you have those 8 questions in your neurology, then you'll find that you'll weave them through the session.
It'll be very conversational. People won't necessarily even know that you've been gathering information that is very specific to what they want.
So in general, we're just getting what's the challenge, issue, or problem, where are we going, what's the goal or results that are wanted, what resources are needed, what's that person's criteria. So criteria words, remember, were those words that describe what's important to that person. So, Al, if I were to say to you, what's important about watching basketball?
Well, it's interesting.
It's interesting.
It's a way. It's a way of being involved when I haven't been able to play.
Oh, okay.
And I enjoy it. It reminds me. I certainly didn't play to the level anybody would have filmed it, but it does remind me of playing. And when I see somebody fall down, I say, "Oh yeah, I used to be able to do that," and I'd be able to get back up. So that's. It's fun, I guess.
So you can see here, he gave you a lot of the sorting. You saw his visual accessing. He's describing, he's listening in his words. I'm finding out how visual he is. Because I asked, the question was, what do you enjoy about watching basketball? So I didn't ask about playing, it was watching. And he said, well, it's interesting. I enjoy it. It reminds me of my involvement in the sports, a way of being involved when he's not able to do that now. So we quickly heard some of the things that were important to him about that. So if that was something we needed to work with, we want to make sure those are things that I'm incorporating into the work, right? And so we get a lot of information with one little question, right? Okay, so moving on. Once you've got some really good information, then you can start to create an action plan. That we know where we are, we know where we're going, how do we get there? It's really, really important to establish trust. There has to be a sense of you being trustworthy. So you've already talked about confidentiality, you already have created a sense of honoring and respect for that person. And for me, oftentimes I will say that if there are persons working on relationships, that the 2 words that I find represent so much of that thing that makes it safe to be with somebody is respect and honor. Respect and honor myself, and then respect and honor the other person. Now we're safe to be together.
Right.
And that describes, integrity and honesty and all other words that might go into that.
Confidentiality.
Yeah. Once you have that information from them, and one sentence will trigger another thought, and so on, I've had clients come in with a list. I want this and this and this and this and this. Obviously, we're not going to do that in one session. So, but I respect that. I said, okay, may I have a copy of your list, or can I write those things down for you so that I'm capturing it in my notes, so that they know those are all important things to me because they're important to them. What I find, what's amazing, is when you do one piece of change work about one issue, oftentimes all of those things were connected anyway, and that's where the work becomes generative, because if you change one thing at all of the hemispheric levels, many other things will fall into place, and that's the fun part of, one of the fun things of the work. So we're going to identify the hierarchy of urgency, like what is the challenge?
Yeah, a lot of times one thing has to happen before something else can. So I want to go for a leisurely stroll in the evening to clear my mind. And if I live in Manhattan, some area, maybe I need to move to do that. So there's sometimes environment has to change, interactions have to change, capabilities maybe. So sometimes one thing has to happen before the next can. Right. So then some things are physically urgent.
Yeah. And if I've been given 2 or 3 things that person wants to be different or to move forward, then, and nothing really stands out for me as something that's crucial to do first, I might say, so for you today, what's the most important thing on your list that you want to start moving forward? So we're chunking it down always to manageable size pieces.
Right.
But to sort of organize things so that we get either the bigger chunks there's that sense of where do you start, and that's finding out, all right, what's going to make the most amount of change, build trust, build rapport, keep that.
And to encourage them. If there's a possibility that by the time someone gets to you, they've had coaches, they've had other athletes,
Lots of good
they've read
advice.
books, they've had a lot of information thrown at them, and nothing ever works, right? Because remember, this is their personal issue. This is their life, their sport. If you can do anything just to give evidence that change is possible and there is hope, that can be a huge step.
Right. And then you want to be some sort of specific action in the Create Action Plan so that there's accountability on their part.
This is where Marilyn will use her recipe cards.
Yeah, I'll say, okay.
She said this is a contract. She didn't necessarily say this is a contract. By writing it down, and depends on the person, some people will have to initial it, but that's still that accountability. And this is where she will use, by this I'm talking about, include the action for accountability.
Right, and I might use a flip chart. Sometimes it's nice when we work through a piece that all of the stuff and information is on the chart and they're done with it. It's now a historical thing. They can throw that piece of paper away and they enjoy tearing it up and so on because they've learned the lesson. They don't need to keep it in their face anymore. They've got it in their database.
You need to move back in camera range.
Okay, so we're going on now to ecology, and that's that evaluation of how we're keeping this safe.
And ecology, once again, it's something that, to me, it's about the most important thing there is. And I'm not going to, there are times I have been known to say, I'm not going to help you with that because what they're asking is unecological in my value systems. It doesn't mean someone else can't do it. I actually had someone come in one time and their opening statement was, I want a boyfriend. And I wasn't going to, that to me was unecological because that was, well, it was what I ended up agreeing to do is to help her become the kind of person that someone she would be attracted to would be attracted to. So it was really, the contract had to be about her, something she could initiate and control. And I told her, I said, I can go out on Wilshire Boulevard and find you a boyfriend. That's not necessarily safe, and I'm not going to do that. So yeah. I was honest about why, and I explained it. But their ecology for me is, it's not just for the client, it's also about my values.
Right. And so when you think about our elements of the system, we've got the three major pieces of the pie, which is our attitude and our state of being, our external behaviors and actions that we're doing in our life, and then how are we thinking? What are those internal computations? So again, that's part of the elements of a system of a person or a couple or a corporation or a learning environment. So we're always considering those things, right? And it's something we're consistently thinking about throughout. It's just those little quick checks. How is this safe? How is this safe? How is this safe? Right? And we're checking.
Interesting when you're saying that. I don't consider myself a pessimist or an optimist or anything, but I'm thinking, how is that not safe?
Interesting.
It's just a different filter.
Well, here's the left brain lead and the right brain lead. I'm going, how is this safe? He's saying, how is it not safe?
So how could it be dangerous?
Right. So we sort it differently to get to the same result. Right. And because we're pretty balanced, we do get to the same result. If he was...
Well, there's a difference too.
Right.
Okay, the basic filter, you hear about rose-colored glasses and that. Marilyn's assumption is that things can or will be safe. So what she's asking, she's presupposing that things are safe or will be safe at a filter default position level. Maybe, okay, my history is definitely different than Marilyn's. I do check for what is not safe. Whether, when we're walking the dogs or anything, that's my filter. I'm getting the big picture, and my filter really is, how is it not safe? And if I can come up with something, then I take care of it. Marilyn's, so it's not just a strategy, it's a whole filter.
It's a filter, yeah, it really is. I just wanted to have an example of how two people can be in a partnership or in a team and focus on they want the same result, which is safety, coming at it from two different directions, which makes them a really balanced team. So we can do it with our partners. If we can do it within ourselves, even better. Yeah. So another thing that we're constantly checking for are hidden fears, secondary gain, ulterior motives, any of those things that might be even out of our client's awareness that is sabotaging them. Oftentimes, if someone is not doing something that they say they want to be doing, they're, funny as it seems, there may be something that when they do that thing, it may open up another doorway or pathway that they don't want to go to, they're afraid of, so they won't do this because it would lead to that. So again, we'll do more about that in the next session. Okay, and then finally our future pacing.
Future pacing is dress rehearsal in a sense. It serves two purposes. One is to check things out. So if I future pace something, say a week out, a month out, and a year out, I'm introducing possibilities that maybe I hadn't thought of. So it gives me a chance to check ecology, check balance and systems and things like that. It's also a place that I can rehearse it. So the next time somebody asks me for something and I wasn't prepared, what will I do? So I'm rehearsing my new strategy. And then if something needs to be tweaked, I have that opportunity. But then when something happens in the real world, I've already done it a few times. I know the strategy, my unconscious mind has a much better grasp of it, and then I'm not caught off guard. Being caught off guard could kind of keep me from wanting to try new things. So yes. Future pacing is a very good ecological thing too.
Right, and I sometimes physiologically will just have someone practice the session, like how will you speak to your coach, or how will you ask for that, or we actually do the linguistic role play because it gets it in their neurology. Otherwise it's theoretical. And it does take practice to shift language patterns or to have the courage to act in a different way.
An example from earlier, if I have things I need to practice or take care of studying, and my friends drop by and want me to go party with them, okay, what will my thought process be when that happens in the future? And then when that happens, okay, I'll consider what I have done, what's the criteria, what's more important. Maybe it's not that important that I study tonight, I can do it tomorrow. So I'm going to put all those things in sequence, but I'm practicing my thought process for it.
Which, and in this case, how to appropriately be setting your boundary for you.
And still honoring the friendship.
Keeping the friendship, right, it's important. And then we want to teach the client more and more how to be responsible for themselves. So the future pacing also is education. It's saying, okay, now you have these tools, you have this new understanding and awareness. You're responsible now. If this happens, sort of like what we started this session with, when this comes up, here's how you deal with it.
So you step back in when you step aside, so you don't.
Okay, so other considerations that you might have that will happen, hopefully rarely, but just to be prepared in case it does. One of the key things is what we call an abreaction, where this is an over-the-top physiological response to something that you're not expecting, the client's not expecting, and you need to get them back into balance again. This is where our pattern interrupts or break state tools are so useful and helpful, because they're say, okay, you're here now, you're with me, okay, whatever triggered that, let's just catch our breath, let's get a sip of water, and we'll come back and we'll stand over here and we'll explore what that is. So you can maybe even be in a dissociated position first, then before you put them back into the whatever it is you're working with. So our goal is to establish safety, to establish that sense of calmness. Sometimes it's, doing some rain gym, cross crawls, or getting them back in their body again.
So sometimes it's as simple as saying, okay, if Myrna starts to react, I say, okay, you're safe now, and we know that happened. All right.
So he's just separating me from that.
Right. So we're going to deal with that, and you and I, we're just going to keep breathing, and we're going to take care of whatever that was.
See, when he said keep breathing, I took a breath. I could not, because he's directing my experience.
Okay, so I'm pointing at it as though it is something else, away, and I use my gesture, and I take it from here, and I said, whatever that is, and I hold it there. I don't move it around like this. I say, okay, whatever that is, we're going to stop it, and it's going to stay right there. And I'm not going to move that hand until she starts breathing, because until she starts breathing, she's still connected to it. When she takes a breath, now I'm okay. It's okay. So that was okay. So then we'll move into what happened and end up doing an anchors away or some other process.
Right. So it does happen occasionally.
It's rare.
It's more rare, and yet you want to know what happens if someone
Which
does
is which is one of the reasons that processes like Anchors Away and compelling self-image and that is one of the reasons I like this. It's not installing anything. All it is doing is finding what the person already knows about the subject. So it's not new to their unconscious mind, and it's not blasting them back into it. Which, like Mary said, it can happen. You need to know what to do if it does.
Yeah, and another sort of, I didn't put on our charts today, but another part of this is what we call squirting, where you're focusing on a topic and suddenly they'll go over here and talk about something else because you just got to a tender spot or a place where they are hesitant, and so they'll talk about something else and go off track. So it's a lesser form of abreaction. And it's critical that I maintain my flexibility. I can't go into my own panic about it. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? I have to stay calm, stay connected, say, whoa, what was that about? And let's talk about it and find out. So, and does future pace, when's a good chance for us to heal this? You may not do it in that moment. That might be, you just get yourself, that person back to safety again.
Right.
All right, so they can, and then obviously, as Al said, we'll do a phobia release, or we'll do whatever it is we need to do to get them into safety for current reality. Another consideration that I love, that Al loves too, is that was what we call generative work.
So when something's working okay, we can use the same skills to get something to work even better.
And I find when at the beginning of some of my sessions, if someone's complaining about something, I'll ask them to just tell me something they're good at or something that they've done well in their lives, maybe not in the context of what their challenge is at all, something where they can go, okay, over here, I did that thing really well, and I'm good at that. So you start to build some of your, what we call your resource anchors with that person. There's evidence that I was able to do that. If I could do that, I could probably do this new thing as well. So it's another way to help us go back. So we're taking someone from where they are now to the next level of accomplishment. So,
and what Myrna has written here too is so often people limit their expectations of what is possible based on past history, someone else's opinion, or cultural superstition. And that's where someone's belief about themselves is probably,
it could be very limiting.
it's probably
my dad always told me I was a klutz. Okay, that's not a really good internal belief for an athlete to have, is to be told, for several years over your lifetime that you're a klutz, and then you try to go have finesse in your sport. Probably a belief we want to change.
Right.
And someone else, so that would be someone else's opinion. Cultural superstition is saying, everybody knows this. Those are those meta model violations that everyone knows that you can't break the 4-minute mile
until someone does.
Until someone did it. Right. So it may not have happened yet. Is it possible?
Right.
So, the other thing we want to be doing for you as a clinician is capturing really good notes. The purpose is to capture information, limiting beliefs, assumptions, criteria, all those things that will help you throughout the time that you're working with that person.
Someone may be talking to you about, answering a question or telling you about an experience. You may hear something that would be a limiting belief. It may not be appropriate to say, whoa, did you hear what you just said?
Yeah, but I may jot it down.
Making a note of it. It may resolve itself by the time they finish their story, and if not, maybe next week, as Marilyn mentioned, when she writes certain things down, it's more respectful for her client because they may come back in a week, a month, or a couple of years.
Right.
Several years sometimes.
So if I'm in doubt, our little phrase, when in doubt, check it out. If I write it down, then I have at least there as a note to know, that could be part of what's limiting that pattern or that change piece, right? I also want to keep on track with the hierarchy of issues. So if someone comes in with a list of 5 things and we only work on number 3 in one session, and then I never go back to that list, it's my responsibility, I think, to say, okay, you had this list, how are you doing with it? I don't have to say, now we've got to do 4, 5, 6. But I will say, so you brought in a list our first session. We've worked on this one. You've got good resolution with that. Let's go back at your list and see if these other things have been resolved as well. So I'm going to assume that they may have been, and then they get to look and see. So I'm being thorough in my work. Capturing language patterns. So what is the client saying about their world or their vision of the world that's going to keep them stuck.
Well, the meta model queries, for specificity. Sometimes people are using the lost performities. They can be canting themselves, or
example is I can't.
Yeah. So you'll hear it in their language pattern, and those are the kind of things you'll take note of.
Right. One of the key points is that if someone is having a critical, punitive internal dialogue for themselves, that's one of the first, like we talk about hierarchy of change, because now it's not even safe inside, let alone not safe in their home or in their environment. But if they're beating themselves up, that's not healthy. So that's one of the first things we've got to get back on board. Mm-hmm. So that just because they didn't do it the first time or perfectly, it doesn't mean they're stupid or that they're klutz.
Right.
And then we want to keep the client accountable for any instructions you've given them so that they do continue on with practice, or they continue on with taking action and moving forward, so that that's part of people's, when we're doing change work, it's not always comfortable. And so you're there as that resource that says, okay, you can do it. You're sort of encouraging them as well, or here's how you can do it. Another thing I like to do is just jot down their key phrases. We talked about that already. It gives you an insight into how they're processing.
Well, it'll tell you a lot about the metaphors they move through the world. They may have like sports metaphors for the relationship, or family metaphors for their sport. Mm-hmm. So by knowing kind of the filter that they're seeing the world through, if everything's about growth and gardening and weeding out the problems and things like that, you can use that to their advantage.
And you may want to be sending some of your information in their own metaphor.
Well, and some metaphors are not necessarily appropriate as a filter for other activities, where a lot of times sports, teams and things like that, they literally use warm metaphors and statements. If you use the same filter in a romance, you're probably going to be like a lot of couples. I mean, a metaphor
competition
will tend, well, it's worse than competition, it's about destroy. And so listening to how they're filtering the world, metaphor will, kind of the presupposed metaphor that they're using.
Yeah. Okay, so then in follow-up sessions after that initial rapport building and connecting and information gathering, you have many versions of that same session. You're just going to move things forward, always maintaining or regaining rapport if it's necessary, making sure that you're holding that person accountable for their own experience.
Well, one of the things that Marilyn has shared with me is, and we've seen it with some of the work we do with phobias now, people will say, well, maybe I really wasn't afraid of heights. Well, we did a filming for height phobia, and they wanted to film the process first and then talk to them about the phobia. And we said, no, you film that first, because after the process, there will not be a phobia anymore. And turns out they did just that. They said, well, maybe I really wasn't afraid of heights. So when Marilyn writes things down, takes good notes, and someone says, well, I never had that issue, and then she can always go back.
And sometimes it's nice to do a review. I'll go back and highlight
look how
things
far you've come.
to let them see how far they've come, because
Right.
when we make really significant change, the good thing is we have amnesia oftentimes for what we had, which is a good thing. However, if there's no evidence of the work you're doing with them, it's good to remind them, yeah, you were here and now you're here.
And especially because one of our goals is to let them be successful in their thought processes, so that they take ownership in
the change.
in the good deeds and things like that. So when they have success, if we're successful at helping them feel they own it, then they tend to, like Marilyn said, have amnesia for not being able to do it.
Yeah. So depending on what the client reports back to you each week, that will give you some insight as to what's the next step. If they didn't do their homework, or they weren't successful at doing it, or they forgot to do it, or whatever else, you don't make them wrong, obviously. You say, okay, that's good information. Because if you're not doing that little bit here that you agreed to, that's probably why you're not moving forward in your sport, because you're not committed to doing what it is you're committing to doing. So just make it be part of that. And reviewing the goals we talked about already. So we have option is to inquire what the client wants to work with next, and review the goals to see if it's been adjusted. because sometimes as we move into change, the goal does adjust. It gets more fine-tuned and more clear.
So then
We have our charts.
what we've done on the PowerPoint presentation is added in some of the charts and things that we've, filters and things that we've talked about that you've already gone through.
And we would offer, obviously, this is part of your coursework. We would like you to use these in your client practice. We do have copyright on this, it's our intellectual property, and yet we want to share. So just give us credit for it, and we'll feel free for you to use
And
it.
share it ecologically.
Yeah. So we had the two charts that go together. This is our left brain, lots of details and information of our levels all the way
The
up
hemispheric
here.
levels, right?
And then this is more the right hemisphere, starting with that sense of identity first, getting that solid, and then moving out through beliefs and values to what eventually is our mission and spirit. We have gone some detail about the brain. Obviously, there's so much more. It's exciting to do more, those of you who are interested. And we spoke last time
Talk about how the information gets to each side of the brain. So there's actually a physical process that puts the information in a way that we can use it.
Right.
And with that process, the motor response is next. The indications of someone's motor responses will give you a clue about what side of the brain is more active for that part of the issue.
Right.
So if I just, Marilyn right now is probably not aware of the top of her arms, but if I go like this, even if I don't touch, her left hemisphere will become more alert because I may touch her arm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nature's way of keeping us alert to what's going to happen. So we know that motor responses will have, emotions and things can be hinted at identification. I want to say it because I don't want to use always.
Mm-hmm.
You can, if somebody's just gesturing like this all the time, that's probably going to be more left hemisphere for me. And if I'm using my left hemisphere all the time,
Left hand.
Yeah, my left hand could be my right hemisphere. So that's more about identity and spatial relations and things like that. So
And our goal is to looking for, when we're doing change work, that we
balance.
have a bilateral balance. They're talking about, yes, I will do that, not, yes, I will, because this side might not.
yeah, I'm the kind of person who really cares about other people. I've demonstrated that many times. And so as I move forward, so I may demonstrate with this, I may demonstrate with this, and eventually it needs to be symmetrical.
Yeah, good. And then our processing filters. This is such an important piece, and we already showed you about our towards and away, where Al sorts for what could be dangerous, I sort for how to be safe. We're going to want to get to the same place. It's just a different way of getting there. And the more each of us have both sides of it, the more individually I will be balanced. And we create balance as a team. So again, just to go down through the filters and notice when you're working with somebody, what filter needs to be opened up or thought through
For
they're
that
missing,
specific
that
context.
that they need to do. We talked earlier about our elements of a system, so that you're aware in change work that you're going to be focusing on all three areas. You don't just
Certainly
change
be
a lot.
aware of all three.
Yeah, don't just, when you change a behavior ecologically, how's that going to change their state and their thinking?
Because entering into a system at any one of the three quadrants, three quadrants, that's a good one.
There you go.
All right.
Pieces of the pie.
The three pieces of the pie. It will have an influence at some level on the other two.
Yeah. And then our eye accessing, where we're noticing that when our eyes are more in the up place, they're more visual. Also, just straight ahead is an internal visual. And the side to side is more auditory processing, and the lower in here is more of our feeling kinesthetic internal processing. This is such an important chart. If we were to look at one sort of paradigm shift, it's to get our clients from being reactive to the outside world, where they have very little choice, to becoming more proactive, that I decide for me. I can learn from you, I can understand, I can take advice, but I'm always going to evaluate it through my filter of what's safe for me and who am I. And then back our learning strategies we talked about.
So-
How do we learn? Yeah, beginning that's good positive state, all the way down to future pacing.
So
That's our slides for today. So check on your dashboard for the rest of the assignments for this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
thanks.